They both grew up in Polish towns before enduring one of the world's most infamous genocides, the Holocaust. Felix and Bluma Goldberg survived the horrors of the Nazi regime and went on to create a life in Columbia, South Carolina, that one could only describe as the American dream. As people around the world gather this weekend to observe Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, our Jordan Markoff spoke with their children who continue to keep their parents' story of survival alive.
For brothers Henry and Carl Goldberg and their sister Esther Greenberg, they see the present through the lens of a painful past, a past their parents endured firsthand.
To see our parents having been suffered for so many years and to see it all potentially happening again was their worst fear.
Those fears played out in nightmares.
I mean, they would have bad dreams. We would hear them, especially my father, screaming out at night.
Her father, Felix Goldberg, was drafted into the Polish army in 1938.
But much later, they separated out the Jewish people from the rest, and then it started to go bad.
So bad that for many years it appeared neither he nor his eventual wife would survive. Felix was loaded onto a cattle train heading for the Warsaw Ghetto.
He jumped off the train and the SS caught him and put him back on the train, beat him up and said, "Stay on this train, you know, you dirty Jew," or whatever, you know, "we're going to the Warsaw Ghetto." Well, a few kilometers later, he took the chance and jumped off again, and this time he was able to stay off.
Putting one foot in front of the other, Felix walked for days until he made it to the town of Tulishkov, where his grandparents lived. It wasn't until a year later he was loaded onto a train heading for the Auschwitz concentration camp. Meanwhile, his eventual wife Bluma was just 13 years old when Nazis invaded her hometown of Pinchov.
My mother's mother and father had to make a decision, and the decision was made is that my mother and one of her sisters, Sella, would leave the family and they would run into the woods.
They wouldn't have known it at the time, but it turned out that running into the woods saved their lives. After hiding from the Nazis behind a lumber yard and going into slave labor at an ammunitions factory, Bluma and her older sister Sella were taken to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp.
Most of the Jewish people in that town ended up in Treblinka. And if you know Treblinka was a death camp. You would just get on the train, you would go to Treblinka, and you'd go right in the gas chamber.
Bluma and Sella ended up contracting typhus at Bergen-Belsen, taking care of each other every step of the way.
Had Mom not had her older sister, and she said to us she probably wouldn't have survived.
And it was the same case for Felix after meeting David Miller in Auschwitz. The two helped each other survive every day, but their loyalty shined brightest during one of their darkest moments, the death march from Auschwitz to Gross Rosen concentration camp.
Dad and David Miller and another person would walk three abreast and hold the middle person up, and they would sleep and walk at the same time.
Surviving on nothing but a few potatoes, Felix would yet again find himself inches away from death as the SS rounded up prisoners in the woods, executing them.
And they called his number. He had a tattoo, and they went by number. And he said to himself, "From this place, I'm not going to move." And the Nazis were screaming at him to everybody with this number, "Come out, come out." He didn't come out, and so he lasted it was 3 days like that, and he made it till the Americans came.
Finally liberated, both Felix and Bluma were taken to Landsberg Displaced Persons Camp, where survivors could learn trades. A short time later, they got married in a double wedding with Sella and David, the two who got them through. With the help of the Red Cross and the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Sella and David were placed in Columbia, South Carolina.
The sisters still wanted to be together. They couldn't think of being that across the ocean from each other.
So after sailing across the Atlantic to New Orleans and getting on a train that would reunite Bluma with her older sister, Bluma and Felix Goldberg landed right here in Columbia. This might now be a restaurant called California Dreaming, but this was once Union Station, a place that served as a gateway to opportunity for a couple who easily could have lost all hope.
Virtually penniless and unable to speak English, Felix Goldberg had to find a way to make a living. But with his finesse, he'd make it happen.
I mean, he came to the United States in 1949, and by 1957, he had his own business.
And that business, Tile Center on Two Notch Road, is still thriving and family-owned to this day. Now, Henry, Carl, and Esther advocate for strengthening Holocaust education and serve as speakers on the Columbia Holocaust Education Commission, something they feel has never been so important.
We would hope that anti-Semitism has decreased, since the Holocaust, but actually, anti-Semitism has really been on the rise.
According to the Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitic incidents rose 93% in South Carolina from 2022 to 2023, and nationwide, they rose 140%. The most dramatic increase came after Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. That day marked the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust.
It's like, what's new? This has been going on since day one. It's like get in line for who hates the Jewish people.
In response to the Israel-Hamas war, pro-Palestinian protests have erupted on American college campuses. Many Jewish students at Columbia University, where one of the largest protests is underway, feel things have turned violent, claiming protesters shout phrases like "go back to Poland" and "death to the Jews." It's this kind of rhetoric that reminds this family of what their parents experienced.
Being against Israel is one thing, being against Jews is another. I think you can express yourself by talking about the country, not about the religion.
A statement these children of Holocaust survivors hope resonates with Americans this Yom HaShoah as the Jewish people do what they're all too familiar with: stand firm in the face of hate.
Our hope is that one day, it won't be again, but our fear is that it is.
Jordan Markhoff, WIS News 10.